Good morning, everyone. Thanks for joining on time. We're just going to give everybody 2 more minutes to join, and we'll kick this off at 11:02. Unfortunately, you cannot interact with us, and we can't see or hear you, so just hang out and watch us for a few minutes.
It's much easier for us that they can't interact. Well, you know what? You guys can use your little emoticons to give us thumbs ups, or that's up at the top of the screen there.
That's how we're doing.
We could chat too,
There
right?
we go.
Thank you, Tim.
And there's a chat section as well.
Yep.
Yeah. Awesome.
Go through that in a
Yeah,
few
definitely
minutes.
feel free to chat. Well, Kristen will fill us all in.
Yeah. Just give everyone a couple minutes. Looks like we have some people joining in now.
John, it almost looks like you've hung up even more stuff in the background. You've got the most interesting background there, like a ladder to nowhere. Or is that a ladder? I don't even know what that is. But there's not, I mean, if I ever get sort of bored during a meeting, I'm just going to look and see what you got there. It's Ali and the fire. Will you turn off the fire in the summertime, or will you leave that on?
No, so right now it's on with no heat. This is just for visual pleasure.
Just for ambiance.
Yeah.
Yeah, a little Barry White in the background too.
Yeah, exactly. That's 30 years of collections.
This is why people come to our presentations. They want to hear this banter between you and I, John.
It's honestly probably
we
true.
don't get to see each other physically because the pandemic and we're far away, whatever. But it's all pent up ribbing.
Oh yeah. Look forward to it. Bring Dmitri in today, so it'll be a great addition.
He's smart enough to duck. He knows to not be involved.
For now. All right, guys, I don't want to hold anyone up. So good morning, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us. My name is Kristen Koenig. I'm a consultant here at Harbor Networks. Just want to go through a few items before we get this kicked off. Unfortunately, as I mentioned, we're unable to interact with you guys. Mics and cameras are turned off, but at the top of your screen, some of you already found that smiley face and can send an emoticon along. If everyone can just do that right now so we know you have access, you can hear us. And honestly, it just makes us feel good that we see all these thumbs up and smiley faces. Oh, thanks, guys. Awesome. So feel free to use those throughout the presentation, letting us know if you're still following along. And next to that is a box with a question mark. So please feel free to use this to submit questions to the presenters. We'll definitely do our best to get through them. And if we can't, we'll follow up after the webinar. And also at the end of the webinar, very short survey. If you've attended these before, they're about 4 questions. Appreciate your feedback on that with regards to this webinar and future ones. Also, something really exciting, at the end of this webinar, each of our attendees will receive a Dunkin' Donuts gift card as a thank you with some documentation on the webinar today. So that's super exciting. And lastly, don't forget this webinar and all of our other webinars are hosted on our website, www.harbornetworks.com, right under the resources tab. So you can go and check out past ones we've done as well. And finally, I will introduce our panelists. First, we have Dmitri DeVos. And Dmitri, if I butchered your last name, please let me know and correct it. Dmitri is the VP of Solutions Engineering at TierPoint. We have Jeremy Vignaux, who's the VP of Technology at Harbor Networks. And we have John Flory, who's the CISO over here at Harbor Networks as well. And I'm going to hand it over to him to kick this off. Thanks, guys.
Great job, Kristen. So Kristen organizes the series, and she does just a tremendous job keeping us in line. It's like wrangling cats sometimes. So Kristen, awesome. Thanks, you so much. So this, I think, is the 6th part of our series. It's really a cybersecurity awareness series where we're going to have some topics, bring in some experts, and talk about different things. And today's is really exciting. BCDR, business continuity, disaster recovery, right? It's really the protection from our companies during a disaster, when something unforeseen happens, when circumstances beyond our control or things happen that we aren't ready for. So we're going to show you how to become ready and talk about it. And really, it's a risk. This is about reducing risk in the end. So this plays right into that. A good BCDR plan. If I want you to take something from me away from this, it's have a plan. right? Have a plan, communicate the plan, and then practice the plan. Have like a tabletop exercise or some type of way to pull the plug, right? And make sure that you are able to recover. And it is what you thought it was going to be. It's interesting because at Harbor, we just went through a tabletop exercise and it was awesome. You know why? Because it's great. We got to rehearse our plan and we learned along the way. And the plan after the tabletop exercise was not exactly the same as it was before. So that was progress, and it really resonated with me. I'm going to kick it over to Jeremy, my sidekick now,
Thanks, John.
before we kick it over to Dmitri, our leader for this session.
Yeah, so I mean, I'll endeavor to try to translate alphabet soup. We're going to talk about BCDR, business continuity, disaster recovery. I'm sure there'll be lots of more acronyms here and there sprinkled through. I think that in our series about talking about security and cybersecurity, we felt that talking about business continuity and disaster recovery was relevant because to some companies, a security event or a cyber event can be a disaster. It could be something that you need to execute a plan on, either to recover and get back to normal or recover and stay in business, or akin to that. I think that we had typically in our minds put disasters in the idea that they were naturally caused, power events, meteors hitting, or whatever. Today, and certainly over the last couple of years, we've had to add security and cybersecurity threats and events as some of the mitigating circumstances that would cause you to have to implement a disaster or continuity plan and so forth. So part of what we wanted to accomplish today is to broaden your awareness of, what's been happening in the BCDR world. Obviously, you could just buy 2 of everything. You could have 2 of every employee in 2 headquarters, but that's typically not cost effective. So a good BCDR plan is a balance between cost, functionality, your goals, and so forth. And it's a broad topic. There are a lot of experts out there today. We brought in one today. Dmitri's going to talk about a lot of things, and this is always a big topic. And I think our point, as John said, is that having a plan is always the most important thing. Even if that plan just means run out the door, it's still a plan, right? So I think that we want you to include business continuity and disaster recovery in some fashion as part of your cybersecurity incident response plan, and realize that it's not just tape backups anymore and so forth. So that's my broad strokes at the beginning of this, and we'll certainly follow up as we go on a little more.
So go for it, Dmitri.
Yeah, so Dmitri, take us through things that people should be thinking about. Appreciate you joining us today.
My pleasure. I want to just double check. I just shared my screen. Everybody
Looks
can see that?
fantastic. Yep.
Perfect. Hey guys, thank you, and thank you for having me on here. Again, my name is Dmitri DeVos. I'm with TierPoint. I'm the Vice President of Solutions Engineering, and I manage a team of solution engineers. One of the responsibilities that I have in my role is to do workshops, IT strategy workshops. And we have a section in there we get into talking about disaster recovery, we're talking about cybersecurity. But where I always want to start with is talking a little bit about digital transformation first. That's been a buzzword that's been around for a few years, and I found that it means different things to different folks. When we came into this and started to develop this strategy workshop, we talked to Gartner and Forrester and a number of the various analysts to help us really understand what is digital transformation and how does that work. And what we've come to understand is that digital transformation is really the sum or the combination of business transformation and IT transformation. Now, if you flip that back, go back 5, 10, 15 years ago, IT was driving the transformation within business. IT had the technology, the cool tools, and they were the innovators in the business model. What's happening with digital transformation is that model is flipping, where business is now taking a more active role in terms of, hey, what do I need IT to do for me to evolve my business? So now business transformation looks at various aspects, and one of those is talking about data protection and BCDR, business continuity, disaster recovery. And why is that? Because, as Jeremy kind of pointed out in the beginning, is there's a lot more than just having some good backups of your environment. There's other threats out there that are impacting us, like cyber threats, malware, locker ransomware attacks, the increasing weather events, like what happened in Texas last month. These are all different aspects. But most importantly, what I've seen in the last year with the pandemic is that our workforce has gone from a 9 to 5 to more of a 24/7 work from home, work anytime model. And that means your business has to be up and running, even if it doesn't mean your customers are accessing it, but your internal operations needs to be up and running all the time. So this is, an example of that, where this was IDC did this, and it's now 82% feel like data protection is really very important to these enterprises. And it's an aspect that they realize that it isn't easy. And Jeremy, you're seeing the same thing when it comes to companies recognizing the importance of this as it pertains?
Certainly. Yeah, certainly. And I agree with your flip of who's the influencer now. I mean, it used to be that IT walked around and said you should start using email, but now companies are saying, how do I engage with my customers in a better way? What can IT bring to the table to make the customer experience better, and sort of flip that requirement? And if I'm going to do that, and I'm going to keep a record of the last time you called or emailed me, now I need to protect that information, because I can't meet my goal if nothing's available because the power is out, or there was a storm, or there was a security incident. So I totally agree, right? I'm seeing the same thing.
John, any thoughts there?
Yeah, when I see this, a few things come to my mind. When I think of data protection, right? In an organization, when we're going to go through this process, this reminds me that we really need to start foundationally, right? We need to start by understanding, what data do we have in the organization? Where is that data? Is it PII? Is it data that is more critical? So the first step, I think, would be to understand what we have in our organization from a data perspective. Where is it housed? How important is it? Who is accessing it? And then we can start to understand, how risky is it, right? And that is a very big part of this formula, understanding basics, policy, data classification. So it starts with, where is our data? And then if we lose this data, what is the consequence? Because then we can start to categorize our data and understand what protections we need to build around it. So you're right on.
And like I was saying, it's easy. No, it really isn't.
Yeah, nothing's easy anymore.
It isn't easy. Picking up there, this is a survey that was done, and what are the top challenges? And there's lots of challenges in managing IT, infrastructure, supporting your end users, prioritization, security. But BCDR is one of those big, coupled with security, is clearly a challenge. And why is it? Well, like we touched on it, back in the day, it was 9 to 5. It was easy. Lots of the businesses were on paper. In fact, there was some tolerance for downtime, but now it's a 24/7 world. It's all digital. It's also about the image of your business, the impact to your business from a financial perspective, from a brand image. If you go down, are unavailable, how does that impact you? How does your customer perceive you? And then layer in all the additional compliance complexities that come into play. Now it's much, much more difficult. And you talk about those challenges a little bit deeper. These are some of the things that I've talking to my customers. Jeremy, these are what they see, and they agree with me. Is like understanding that the migration, the data migration, the transfer, the replication, the cost. How do I recover? Is it, can I recover quickly and fast? And then keeping my team up to speed in terms of training. these are the areas that really are the struggle. Jeremy, what are your thoughts there?
I think that a lot of people see disaster recovery and continuity as a cost center. I think a lot of people still think of it as an insurance plan that they're paying for. It's obviously more complicated than that because, implementing or executing on a recovery, or whether it's an event recovery or it's a continuity event, it does require your own participation significantly. It's not the same thing as just calling the insurance agent and filing a claim. It's a process. So you need to have a lot of people invested in it. You need to have training. You need to test it. And you need to balance out the cost in a broader scale. You mentioned previously that the image of a company being offline for 24 hours has a larger impact to a lot of companies today. And so all of these categories between, balancing cost with image and reliability, involving internal staff, involving multiple departments in the staff as well. You can't not be able to execute your recovery plan because someone's on vacation, that kind of stuff. So sometimes people are looking to partners to augment their BCDR plan so that they can work with somebody's help and so forth. So yeah, I think people now get it that this is no longer just insurance, that it's a core part of operational, resilience and so forth.
There are definitely challenges, though, and I like what you've written here. And so all these come into play. It starts with a BIA. I'm going to throw another acronym at you.
Break it out for me,
Right?
John.
It starts with a business impact analysis. So in other words, we need to understand if we lose this function in our business, how are we affected? And then once we understand that and go through our organization, then we can start prioritizing and making an effective and efficient plan that's cost effective, that the board and the C-level, right, is going to buy into. And it's really interesting. And I'm always on the soapbox about risk in IT, because in my business, what I do is I sit with the business holistically. And when we look holistically, IT holds very little risk in an organization. So it's so important to go through these exercises, to go through a business impact analysis, to go through the data classification. So you're talking to different parts of the organization. So we can start culturally. It's CPPT, right? Culture, people, process, and technology. We're under attack. So that's our best defense, is to have everybody understand organizationally, hey, IT has a firewall, IT's got backups, right? So we're all set. That's the mentality that a lot of us are living in out there. So going through these type of exercises, and this is a way to start, to go to the board, to go to the C-level and say, hey, all hell is breaking loose in the world. We need a business continuity disaster recovery discussion. And then once we go through the discussion and start understanding what's important to us, what's risky, marrying it all together with the business, that holistic picture is going to help us get there. Because if everybody's not bought in, these challenges are going to remain. So we have to bring them in, and it's really through communication and awareness.
Yeah, right on, right on. And taking that a step further, one of the areas that we've seen with BCDR has been helping up is this is also can be aligned with a cloud adoption strategy. And I do see a lot of customers thinking, hey, the idea of duplicating my environment, buying equipment, and having it just sit there waiting for something to happen isn't really efficient, really cost effective. And frankly, it's outdated thinking. You don't need to do that. And looking at a cloud strategy is for your disaster recovery could be or is a good first step, where you can do some dev tests in there, but you can also do your backups and your recoveries into the cloud. And that allows you to get used to or understand the nuances and the practicalities of how cloud will fit into your long-term evolution or strategy. Jeremy, what do you think? Thoughts on that? Do you agree with that?
Yeah, I do. And one of the things that's attractive about cloud as a destination for some BCDR storage and things like that is it tends to be more incremental. Whereas in the old days, people would take one of their other offices and they'd buy a bunch of equipment and they'd replicate geographically to that other office. That the cost of standing up that infrastructure in the secondary location, where you were talking about buying stuff that just sits there quietly and slowly depreciates, but it's not used day to day. The attractiveness of buying something in the cloud is that it's a bit more linear in its expense as you need to add or expand or back up more or need more resources in the cloud without these incremental capital costs of doing it. So a lot of people are attracted to that, to see that they can expand over time. Now, the other thing that you mentioned, which I think is important that people understand, is to not assume that because you've moved a service to the cloud, say, for example, Salesforce.com or your CRM or whatever that may be, you shouldn't assume that that doesn't need your BCDR attention. I think some people wish that were the case. They would be like, "Oh, we're all done. Somebody else is handling it," but that's not the case. So I think that you'll see this in a lot of people who deal with Microsoft, for example, is they may have their email hosted with Microsoft, but they also have access to their email through a archiving third party, which gives them some resilience against having all their eggs in one basket, so that if one of their cloud providers is down, they don't lose access to everything. So I don't think people should assume that because they've moved to the cloud, they're 100% scot-free as far as DR planning there too. But that, coupled with the power of using the cloud as a destination, is really attractive to a lot of people, because it's a lot easier financially to slowly expand your BCR to plan into the cloud. And we'll talk about this in case studies later about using it either for storage or replication or whatever that may be. But the cloud, the whole concept of using the cloud either for production or replication does help people get a better handle on what they can do, and then opens it up broadly of what their options are, instead of just buying two of everything like we talked about earlier.
So cloud, this opens up. So I'm a security guy, right? So I'm always going to hit you from that angle. And I love cloud from the perspective that, the availability, from a security perspective, availability, you can't beat it, right? It's absolutely an imperative part of the strategy. And you have to include cloud. Cloud's about the contract, about the SLA. Some of the dangers in cloud is what Jeremy said is, oh, I'm fine, I'm in the cloud, or oh, my data's in the cloud. It's great. When it comes to data, if you collect that data, it's yours. I don't care where it is. Okay, until deletion. So understand that. So to understand, what is this cloud provider doing with my data? Is anybody accessing it? Do they have any vendors that they're using that have in their contract that they can sell our data? Right. So it's really comes down to, now you got to get legal involved, right? And you have to get some high level consultation involved when you enter these cloud contracts, because they're awesome and that's really a great option, but they have to be vetted. And I would say even more so than if it's our own, because we've got that extra factor, right? That it's not our own. So all that comes into play. The 3-2-1. Okay, I don't think that's an acronym of that. So 3-2-1 is a strategy for backups, which includes cloud. And cloud is great because it's cost effective and you can tier it, and the recovery times. All this is so important. 3-2-1 is 3 different backups, 2 different medias, and 1 off-site. Right, cloud, great off-site. I think of cloud as a tool in our toolbox, and tools are awesome, but tools do get beat also. So don't have a false misconception that if I put everything in a cloud, my data is A, private and secure, and B, make them prove to you their security due diligence and document that. That's the key. make sure you document it and you ask the questions. And this comes into a whole third-party vendor management, but who's accessing our data, how important is it, all that type of thing. So I went on a rant.
Verify, yeah.
Yeah, but there's a lot in there to unpack.
So, John, let me just kind of pick up on one thing. You're talking about backups a lot. In the BCDR realm, are backups good enough?
No.
It's a leading question, brother. It's a leading question.
Yeah, it's probably a DDR. No, it's a piece of it. It's a piece of it.
And that's where I get into, the next step I get into with talking to customers. There is a conception still that's out there that, I have tape backups. And yes, I have 2 copies. And yes, I may even have a copy somewhere off-site, either in the cloud or some other location, satellite office, etc. But backups, in my opinion, that's your last resort. If I need a file or something like that, I'm going to go to a backup and I'm going to pull that file for sure. But if I need to recover my entire environment, that's a painful experience. And here's a little bit of why that is. A typical backup job, a backup day, you're going to take this workload where we have in this workload some app servers, some web servers, database servers, maybe some file servers as well. You'll start your backups at 11 p.m. on your app tier. Then around 1 a.m., it'll switch over to your web server tier. Then around 2 a.m., probably your quietest time of the night, maybe, you'll do your database, and your database will run. And then finally, you'll wrap it up with your file server, and you're done at 5 a.m. Now, let's say, 5-7 hours later, it's 1 p.m. in the afternoon, some terrible incident happens, and you've got to restore all of this. Well, you've got app servers that were, with a backup that was somewhere between 11 and 1. You've got a web server that was between 1 and 2 that you got this database server that was, any time in the 2 a.m. to 4 a.m. range. You've got to synchronize all of these. So not only do you have to restore them, then you have to start looking, what do I have to roll back to get to the lowest common denominator? Do I need to get my database server in sync with my app server that started at 11? That's a long process. First of all, getting the tapes, restoring the tapes, they're only as fast as they can go, depending on the media. And then once you have the tapes and you have the servers up, then you have to look at what do I have to do to make, to bring all of those servers into alignment. And that's why your backups are a part of the solution, but they're not the end-all be-all, especially if you're looking at, I need to be up and running in minutes or hours versus days and weeks. Jeremy.
Right. RTO.
Yeah, John.
Yeah, I was going to say, Dmitri, the details about consistency and when is the backup actually being restored. People also need to remember, and you mentioned this as well, is a restore typically takes even longer than a backup. So if your backup job ran for 2 hours, it might take 4 hours to restore. So just think about sitting there twiddling your thumbs, anxiously, hoping that this moves faster, and your boss coming to talk to you and say, when are we going to be back up and running? And you're like, well, I don't even know. I mean, I got another 4 hours to wait for the restore to happen. Not everything is a meteor hit. So not everything is a disaster of such epic proportions that people are going to have patience for it. It might be that something went wrong, and now you're talking about an 8-hour window to restore. Backups, and I agree with you, Dmitri, they really are a last resort. They're not a business continuity plan. They're a disaster plan, but not a continuity plan, probably.
And also, soon you have the equipment to restore to.
Oh, you're right. Yeah, I can't, the tape drive, that you can't buy anymore is the one that burned in the fire. And then what good are backups and things like that? So yeah, I remember the whole days of trying to restore on different hardware, and the drivers were never right. And oh my God. Yeah. On top of the fact that it took 4 hours to restore a Microsoft Exchange database and nightmares like that.
It's huge.
I used to have more hair back then because of that.
I want to talk about RTO for a second, but when I look at this slide, what sticks out to me is 11 p.m. to 5 a.m. is a huge attack vector for cybercrime. They're not attacking you during the ones that don't know what they're doing are the ones that this time period is when they're going after everyone, right? Because they're hoping you're sleeping and they're hoping you're not watching, right? So that is a big trend that we're seeing. I know it's not the purpose of the slide, but it's something that jumped out at me when I looked at the slide. And that's why it's so important to go through scenarios and practice this, to pull the plug, to understand how long, what is my RTO and what is my RPO. Those are two other terms I want to talk about quick. Our recovery time objective. How long is it going to take me to recover? Okay, we have backups. We have this plan. Okay. How long does it take? Maybe we don't have adequate bandwidth. Maybe, who knows? There's so many different factors. That's why when you practice it, it sometimes can be alarming, right? And then RPO, recovery point objective. Getting back to what Dmitri is saying, from what point in every single application, really, when do we need to recover from? Can we go a couple hours without that data? Can it be a couple minutes? So this is why the plan is important.
Yeah, if you're taking customer orders and your recovery point objective is my restore can't be any older than 5 minutes because otherwise I'll have too many orders that I lost or whatever. That's a key metric in what your design is.
It's huge. And I'm working in the insurance industry right now where it's called parametric insurance, and it's specifically designed for cloud providers going down, because 99.999, that's a good percentage for uptime. But when you figure out that in those hours, a lot of hours of downtime. So if they're up 99.999, you're still down. There's still downtime. You have to take all this into account because it's all truth and fact.
You bring up a good point there. When you talk about 5 nines of uptime, you're talking about minutes of downtime a year. You're not going to get that with a backup solution. You're not going to recover fast enough with a backup solution. And that's where you need your recovery point, your recovery time. Now you're moving from days to hours or even minutes, depending on the level of the. You mentioned security and that's in data breach trends. That's it. Kind of thanks for the segue there. That worked well. These are just some stats. This is about a year old, and I think it's changed dramatically. We're waiting for the updated survey on this, but $3.92 million in breaches. It's expensive. The average data size, 25,000 records. Here's in a very this is a really bad stat, and this is really eye-opening. 279 days to realize you've been breached. In other words, some villain has been in your system, in your house, for almost a year, messing around with your stuff before you recognize it. And it's very hard. And now you're talking about how do you account for that? Now, there's a whole bunch of security measures that you need to put in place, another conversation for another time. But in terms of disaster recovery, there are ways to mitigate ransomware and ransomware attacks with a good DR solution. And this is where we move away from a backup solution to more of a real-time replication solution using technologies like Zerto, some of the Veeam tools as well, where you're doing real-time journaling from one site to another site. And you have these multiple checkpoints that could be minutes apart. And over the course of the period of, say, a month, you can say, I was attacked. Crap, last Tuesday at 4 p.m. I was attacked. Okay, let's go to our disaster recovery Zerto tool. Let's dial back the clock to 3:50 on Tuesday just before it and turn us up and go from there. That's one of the really nice things about a good DR solution. When you're using a replication tool like a Zerto or a Veeam, you can select your recovery points much faster and recover much quicker in that term. Jeremy, what are you thinking? I see you nodding.
I'm thinking that the less time before you're up and running, the better. And I think that, between internet pipes being faster, cloud providers having more options, there's so much more available to you than there was even 5 years ago. in this category. And this is a great example of that. Disaster recovery as a service, or DRAS, and replication. Replication used to be in the realm of only giant enterprises who had the money to execute it, and that has really come down to the masses here, especially with partnering with cloud partners who can build that infrastructure for you. So slam dunk for this, for anyone who wants to be up and running in less than 24 hours.
Speed's everything. I mean, speed is everything. If you have a disaster, if you have an attack, right? For even if it's cybercrime coming after you, speed is so important. So this is key. And if you go back to your last slide, you don't have to go back there, but it's alarming. 200 days, because the one thing that a lot of things have changed in a year in cybercrime and in cyber world and what's going on out there. And one of the biggest things that has changed is the attack is they're not encrypting you until they take your data first now. So that stat, when they're in there for that long, is so scary, right? We have to make sure that they're not in our network. We have to have eyes on glass and being able to, while we're sleeping, are they coming into our network and taking something and then leaving and coming back and doing that repetitively? These type of things are happening. So that sticks out in my mind. We have to be able to detect quicker, and then to have these type of technologies that Dmitri is showing you on the back end is crucial, because speed is money, time, and even life and death. The medical industry is being ravaged right now. They know you're busy and they know there's a lot going on, and they're taking advantage of it. So this comes down to life and death. So this speed is huge. It's everything.
It is. You talk about, and I would argue that that's pretty conservative, a traditional 24-hour recovery point objective. In a DR, in a ransomware situation, you might be looking, a lot longer than that. Hopefully you have, tape backups that, go back there, especially if they've been sitting there marinating in your system for a while, versus maybe a 15-minute recovery time objective. And let's break this recovery time objectives down a little bit here. This is a good reference that I use when you're trying to figure out, what do I need? Like, what do my applications need? Do they all need to be up in 15 minutes? Not necessarily, right? John, you want to talk to this a little bit?
No, I like it. Go. I love it.
All right. So we had this. So this is a table that I use. So critical infrastructure, yeah, it's got to be up within 15 minutes. And your recovery point, it's got to be like nil. You cannot lose anything. Some companies, you lose a couple records, that's still tens of thousands of dollars. Not to mention, if you have to go back to your customers and say, "Oh, I lost that," there's brand image impact as well. Then you look and you break it down further. Some of the mission critical platinum, maybe that's 1 hour. With an 8-hour recovery point, I think that's a little bit lax. I think you could bring that down to like maybe an hour or a couple hours. Then you have your gold and your silver. It all depends on that business impact analysis that John talked about. When you do a good BIA, you're actually looking at all your workloads and you're trying to understand what's the cost of downtime by that workload, by that tier of architecture.
Yeah, you're going to know where your crown jewels are, right? You're going to know, where are my crown jewels once we do the PIA? Because say we have an army of 10, right, and we're spreading them all around, we might want to put 5 of them right here. So that business impact analysis is a great exercise. Remember, because it's going to perpetuate throughout the organization. It's going to get other people involved because their input is needed, and that's going to bring awareness and help from a cultural perspective in case an event happens, and more importantly, to help prevent an event from happening. So, yeah.
Jeremy, any thoughts?
Pay attention to the last column. It costs more to keep stuff up quicker, but you don't necessarily, as you said, you don't need to necessarily have one bucket. You could have multiple buckets and apply costs to them.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And I'm glad you brought that up, because is it expensive? Can it be expensive? Yeah, it can. Is it as expensive as we thought it is? This is the interesting part. When I talk to customers and we break it down, we look at the various options out there, especially when you are looking at service providers that are specialized in this. It's not as big as an investment. And I have a real life case study I want to share with you folks that we did. I scrubbed a little bit so there's no names on it, but it kind of gives you an idea of like how offsites backups versus DRAS and the cost difference and what the impact is to the business. So this was some analysis. The XXX is the customer name that I pulled out, so you kind of understand this is real customer here. They had a backup plan. They did 2 backups. They had daily onlines, weeklies, and their weeklies were air gap, meaning they took them out and they moved them to an offsite location. They had some VDI that was out of scope, but but their issues as we talked through this and did this analysis is it's an intensive manual process. It would take weeks. There was no testing, and John touched on that. You got to test you should do a DR test once a year at minimum. The impacts, we did a light BIA, and there was clearly some financial impacts there. And we gave some recommendations. The offsite backups are important, but I think what we strongly recommended was augmenting them with that real-time replication solution and develop an annual test. So this was a modest environment, not huge by any means. The customer, clearly these smaller, they're very cost conscious. Expenses was a concern for them, especially when they looked at a DRAS. And when they first started talking to us, they're like, we can't afford that. We just want to talk about offsite backups. And we worked with them and we kind of understood, okay, tell me a little bit about your mission critical apps versus your ancillary VMs. And we were able to create these tiers that we talked about. The full environment is 66, but hey, these 34, these are your mission critical apps, and these probably need to be up faster than a week because it is expensive. These other ones here, not so much so. Dev, test, other things that are, that's not as critical, but important nonetheless. And here's what we did: we laid out an option, and I want to show this to you just to give you the idea of what does it mean in terms of cost, right? Option 1 was their Veeam Cloud Connect offsite repository. They needed 30 terabytes. That's what they came to us asking for. Their RTRPO was anywhere from 2 to 14 days, depending on the workload and how they prioritized it and how lucky they were. It was all manual, and it was available in resources. So they admitted they didn't have this place to restore this. So if they had an incident where we call affectionately in the business a smoking hole incident, where their production environment was gone, there was no place to do it, and they would be scrambling. And the cost was about $2,700 a month. Okay, that works. So then we looked at option 2. Hey, what if we just took your mission critical apps and then looked at taking a Veeam repository for those ancillary servers, using a DRAS, using a Zerto solution for real-time replication, getting an RPO of under an hour, and then the rest, working for those. Those are still 2 to 4 days, still a little manual, but they're easier to work with. You don't have to worry about the cost difference was only a couple $1,000s more a month. And what that gave them was the ability to, in one incident that lasted for, would have paid for this in spades over the course of the life of the contract. They had one outage, and for the record, they had already had 2 in the last year, one due to a power issue and one due to a air conditioner on the second floor above them leaking into their production environment. So they understood the impact and the cost. And then option 3 was an all-in, just DRAS only, walk away from your Veeam. We were strongly urging that this was probably the most effective solution, but kind of gives you an idea. You're not talking about tens of thousands of dollars to do this. You're talking, per month. You're talking about a smaller number. And then here's just a quick, an example. Drawing's worth 1,000 words, as they say. This was, This over here was your customer site. and you could, you do this customer site to a cloud provider with full-on network security. Things like having the firewalls synchronized so that if you do fail over, all of the access doesn't change. It's seamless to the end user or the customer. Still have a little bit of Veeam repository for some of those ancillary systems, but you have Zerto for the replicated servers that are available to spin up on demand. And you're not paying for these resources. You're just paying a small reservation fee so that they're guaranteed available for you.
That's a big addition. I was going to say, Dmitri, that people sometimes forget about that. And I like your image there of the smoking hole scenario. It's one thing to have backups, but if you don't have the equipment to restore the backups on, and now you're adding, I got to wait a day or two for new servers to show up because we had a fire in the data center or whatever that may be. You have to add those times. So in this case, you were mitigating that by using a cloud infrastructure that could stand up in the event that you failed over, and you've minimized the cost of that by reserving hardware but not buying it. Again, as I mentioned earlier, leveraging that economies of scale that cloud providers have of being able to have equipment there ready for you without you having to make that capital expenditure. I assume they took one of your recommendations here, Dmitri, right? Did they go with option 2 or window number 2? Okay.
They are option 2 was where they decided to go to, and what they did was when they brought this slide to their C levels, there was an aha moment. They came back to us and said, "Thank you. We've been trying to sell this for the last 5 years." But when they realized, when we put it in front of the CTO, he's like, "Oh, okay, I get it." And the option 2 was there.
Yeah, probably the most effective insurance plan that they purchased. That's, I wouldn't call that a small system either. I mean, 66 VMs, 30 terabyte storage it's not an SMB maybe, but yeah, that's a superb example there too. And presumably they run tests. They have it in their plan. It's fairly easy for them to fire up and make sure that it actually works. People log in. And I think a lot of people probably sleep a lot better at night.
Yeah, you bring up a good point. That includes, as a service provider, whether TierPoint or whomever, there's a lot out there to choose from. Talk to John and those guys; they'll help you figure that out, which is the best one. But you're going to get a DR, you're going to get a run book, and that run book is the recipe. If there's a DR, how do I restore this? Right. That's a living document. That's on the service provider to maintain, because they're going to be the ones that are going to bring up your systems and then hand them off to you as in a full service DRAS solution. And then the testing, it should automatically come with included in the cost every year an annual test. That would be run with you and the service provider in tandem. Those are some of the additional benefits, kind of offloading some of the complexities and the challenges that we talked about in the beginning onto a service provider.
Yeah, great from a regulatory perspective, vendor management perspective, audit perspective, as well as just overall safety. Dmitri, you're an awesome partner, and one of the reasons is because of your resource like you, man. I've loved working with you, and we've been doing it, so it's great. I'd like to let everybody out a couple minutes early. I think maybe we should just Dmitri, then Jeremy, and then I'll wrap us up, and we'll get out a couple minutes early. And we're here. Contact us, and we can definitely have a conversation about a starting point or really anything that you need. That's our mission. That's we're geeks. That's what we love. That's what we do. Keeps us rolling. So Jeremy or Dmitri,
Sure.
Why don't you kick us off, and then Jeremy.
Yeah. Go ahead, Dmitri.
Yeah, I appreciate the time, folks. The disaster recovery is business continuity. It's an important thing. We do, as I mentioned, these IT workshops. They're free of charge. They're free service. It's it's not just come up and show up. It takes a little bit of work. We probably give you invest about 10 hours of our time to do this and give you a nice little deliverable. But talk to John and Jeremy. They're the guys to go to. They're going to help you set you in the right direction. But again, I thank you for your time, and I'm looking forward to working with you guys in the future.
And I'm going to sound like a broken record because I feel like I bring this topic up every time. Make a plan. It's always easier to execute a plan than have to come up with the plan and execute it under duress, right? If you're responding to an incident, whether it's, you know, the weather, whether it's a security incident, whether it's a bad employee, or whether it's a dump truck that hits the telephone pole in front of your building, if you can execute a plan, you've already figured it out, you're way ahead of the game. And putting DR and business continuity as a key aspect of that is unimaginably important. So again, if you do nothing other than come up with a plan and write it down and figure out that your RPO is in fact 48 hours, that's still better than you surprisingly coming up with something while someone's yelling at you over your shoulder. So plan.
Yeah, it's a completely different to be prepared. So I like that. I'm going to end with this. We're going to have incidents in our organizations. There's going to be things that happen. Let's learn from them. Let's do postmortems, and that's how we're going to get there. It's a journey, right? We're just going to keep going towards that. So when there is an incident, and we didn't talk about this as much as I wanted to learn from it. That's one of the biggest things I want you to take out of this is that's an opportunity for us, right? To kind of reset and to get better, do a business impact analysis of data classification. When I respond to breaches, it's really scary when someone has your data, but it's more scary when you don't know what they have, right? So understand what's your data, where is it, who's accessing it, how dangerous is it? Then go to your third parties. What data are they accessing it? How important is it? How am I classifying them? How am I making sure they're taking care of my data? And then from a BCDR, let's have the plan. Let's practice it. We just went through it through Harbor. It was awesome. I want to do it again. So
every week,
it was just a great thing
tabletop every week, John.
Yeah, we learned.
No, we'll be exhausted.
Yeah, Kristen's going to say, take the survey once we hang up here. I think it's going to pop up, and we're going to be back at you. I think it's a deep dive into the dark web. So it's going to be really cool as we're going to go in. We're going to check it out. And we're going to, go through that landscape. So that's going to be our next webinar series. Thank you. Awesome job.
Right.
Thanks, Jeremy.
Bye, everybody.
See ya.